Welcome back to my Pokemon Platinum Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Poison Type Pokemon. In the last episode, we helped Lucas deal with some bullies, we experienced a massive spike in the overall power level of our team thanks to some well-needed evolutions, and we absolutely demolished Crasher Wake with our newly obtained power. With Cyrus and Celestic Town out of the way as well, it's time to pick up the final encounter of the entire run and prepare for Iron Island and Byron. Let's do this. With the HM for Surf now in hand, it's time for our tour of the Sinnoh region. In my Sinnoh adventure so far, I find that this point in the story tends to be the perfect transition period between the first and second half of the game. It's a good time to backtrack and to pick up a ton of useful items. The Luck Incense in particular is helpful for us in this run since we were unable to obtain the Amulet coin from Amity Square. And it's also a good time to complete some side content as well as train up our team for both experience and EVs as well. The TM for Thunderbolt is unfortunately wasted for us because I believe Gengar is the only one that can learn it, and we already invested the money into our own copy before we took on Crasher Wake. The TM for Giga Drain will obviously be going to Rosalia/Roserade at some point, although it would be tempting to assign it to our next encounter as well, but we'll see. And speaking of which, let's get into that encounter right now. Our final encounter for the entire run is none other than the tried and true Tentacool. No matter what type of run or game you are playing, this will always be a fantastic addition to your team. Tentacool is fast, thick on the special side, and it will do everything you want it to as your bulky water type. And honestly, a good water type is exactly what this team needed to round out our overall offensive toolkit. Welcome to the team, buddy. Let's continue our tour of Sinnoh. First up to take care of some of that training I mentioned earlier, and we're looking to max out our Gengar and Tentacool's speed. I think we'll need it against some of the quicker Pokemon we'll encounter later in the game, especially for the League. And after spending some time doing that, we head over to Fuego Ironworks and Floroma Meadow to pick up even more items. The Miracle Seed may be useful for Roserade, and rare candies and PP-ups are always nice. Moving into the Ironworks themselves, we navigate through the classic spinny tiles, pick up the TM for Flamethrower, which again, I'm not sure if anyone can really learn it since I think Skuntank gets it via level up anyway. And finally, we speak to Mr. Fuego to unlock a pretty solid method of obtaining more shards for move tutors. We'll definitely make the trip back here again at some point to turn in more star pieces we collect to maximize our shard inventory. More side areas await as we head over to routes 220 and 221. Nothing special on route 220, the first few trainers proved to be no issue at all, but I did decide to play it safe towards the end of the route against the two swimmers that use a Tentacruel and a Floatzel. We just fought them one at a time. And that is an important aspect of Sinnoh to keep in mind as you play through your own runs. There are certainly many more random trainers in these games that have the potential to take you out, and in my experience, lots of them become especially scary during a double battle situation. I often take them for granted myself, which is very evident just from this playthrough alone. Moving on to Route 221, we've got the TM for X-Scissor and Ace Trainer Jake, which is always a tough fight. We had a close call here. Staraptor was a handful and could have easily torn Crobat into pieces, but at least we played the rest of the fight perfectly by utilizing our immunities to their fullest. Finally, at the end of the optional route, just past the Pal Park, we reach the house to the north. I'm just gonna call this guy Mr. Sash, because that's really all we're here for. I give our team a quick check to see if all the levels are different before we go through this little grind, and then I begin our resets. And finally, after some time later, we obtained our Focus Sash for the run. Always a great tool to use, especially in the late game. That right there concludes our first major tour of the Sinnoh region. Let's start making our way over to Canalave. Route 218 is normally pretty uneventful. You've got the rare candy at least at the very beginning of the route. You've got a man and his many Gyarados, which are not threatening in the slightest in the presence of Gengar. But with Croagunk soaking up all of the experience leading up to this point, we've finally got our Toxicroak. The speed, damage, and move pool diversity should be fun to play around with, and having our fighting type come online just in time for Byron and Iron Island is a very nice bonus. Now entering the beautiful Canalave City. Other than taking a moment to enjoy the music, I once again grabbed the TM for skill swap and still have no idea what I can use it for. Let me know if any of you guys have gotten some good use out of this move. I'd love to use it someday. And now, let's move on to our first major fight of the episode. This is definitely the point in the game where Barry starts to become a little bit more dangerous. We lead with Gengar to deal with Barry's new Staraptor. As scary as this edgy bird can be, a swift Thunderbolt from our boy should be more than enough to bring it down. With Torterra now in, we switch into Crobat and we get hit with the Leech Seed. Without too much to worry about for at least a turn, I decided to keep our purple bat in to see how far we can go. Our cross poison hits for a decent amount, but so does the incoming bite, and the effects of Leech Seed that followed. Looks like I'm going to have to try something different. I switched into our Toxicroak next to break him in for the first time, and I was able to do this because, as it turns out, this Torterra does not have Earthquake, which I guess would mean that it doesn't have Earthquake in the later fights either? Can someone confirm this? If that's true, that would be horribly misrepresenting the Turtwig line from the rival's perspective. That would be like omitting close combat from Infernape, for example. You just can't do it, especially for major fights like this. Like, come on. After some back and forth, Toxicroak is eventually able to take Torterra down with a few poison jabs. With the amount of damage that our fighting Poison Toad has sustained, we'll have to switch into something else for this Heracross. I was kind of hoping that would be Crobat, but I think it would be too risky at this point. So let's see what Skuntank can do. The Aerial Ace comes in for a moderate amount of damage, and then we respond with Flamethrower. Massive damage there, and we are faster, but the incoming Brick Break hits us like a truck. Luckily, no crits here, and then on the following turn, we burn Barry's Beetle down to the ground. With Rapidash in now, we switch over to Gengar to finish this thing off. I chose this over Tentacruel because it seemed likely that we would be dealing with either Takedown or Stomp, both of which can be completely avoided with Gengar. I'm also not worried about the Fire Spin either, which is the only attacking move that Rapidash can actually use here, but as it turns out, it wouldn't have mattered anyway, as a single Shadow Ball is enough to send our rival's mount back to the stables. Floatzel brings up the rear, and since we are locked in with choice specs, we go for one last Shadow Ball to finish the fight off. After the battle finished up, I just remembered that we had skipped on a very powerful item for this run specifically, and so I flew back to Pastoria to set ourselves up to obtain it. I've taken Dustox back out of the box temporarily, and I'm teaching it Thief in order to grab our item, which is none other than the Black Sludge. For anyone wondering, I will not be farming these up to be used on all of my Pokemon. I'm just going to allow myself to use one. Black Sludge is basically leftovers, but for poison Pokemon only, allowing the holder to heal a small amount of HP back at the end of every single turn. This should be a great item for the likes of Skuntank and even Tentacruel in certain battles. And speaking of Tentacruel, we spent some time back on Route 212 training her up while we were over on that side of the map anyway. I'm gonna need her for our trek through Iron Island. And speaking of Iron Island, I know, I'm just killing it with these transitions. Let's head over there now. Gotta grab this hidden star piece here for some extra shards later, and randomly obtain the HM for strength from our new buddy, Riley. We continue our training session for Tentacruel by completely wiping out the local wildlife. This is actually going to be nice for some defense EVs as well, so Tentacruel can better take physical hits. And after our training session, we quickly snaked through the first level of the cave and headed down to the next floor to traverse the rest of this place with Riley. I mentioned this in the walkthrough, and I'll mention it again here. In all honesty, you might just be better off choosing to take on these fights alone. As powerful as Riley's Lucario can be offensively, I find that far too often it goes down during battles in a hurry. I will normally keep this in mind myself, but I do enjoy double battles a lot, so I tend to only incorporate this strategy when I'm really struggling against a specific set of trainers. We had a pretty big advantage here against the Battle Girl and Black Belt, assuming we can take out the Medicham quickly, which we do, and Toxicroak's lousy attempt to set up Nasty Plot did not go over well for them either. But now we get into Iron Island's boss fight, a mandatory double battle against Ace Trainers Jonah and Brenda. Quick side note on Platinum in general, I love that they added these much tougher trainer fights to the end of a bunch of different routes across the region. It's honestly one of my favorite parts about the game, and I felt like Game Freak did a really nice job with them. Back to the fight, and this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Riley's Lucario gets kicked in the nuts on the first turn, and right out of the gate, I can tell we're going to end up dealing with a 1v2 at some point very soon. After Lucario puts his family jewels back into place, he smacks Lopunny across the face so hard it actually causes paralysis, which is very fortunate because we are going to need to be faster in order to take Lopunny out on the next turn and avoid another attack like that. Roselia's Giga Drain sucks the life out of Quagsire, and now Staraptor joins the fight. If Lucario wasn't already vulnerable enough, lowering its attack is certainly not helping. I decided to switch into Gengar, hoping that Lucario would go for Lopunny again. But the Ace Trainers decide to take a switch of their own into Medicham. Really heads up move there that you don't normally see from a random trainer. Even though Force Palm isn't really very effective here, Lucario manages to get the paralysis for a second attack in a row. And then Staraptor hits our Gengar with a hefty aerial ace. On the next turn, I go for the Shadow Ball on Medicham. And it's enough to take it out, but I am worried about our Gengar here. Lucario goes for yet another Force Palm, and again hits the paralysis. Those odds must be less than 1%. However, Staraptor would break through and land a disgusting blow on Lucario, taking Riley's only Pokemon out in the process. I knew we would be at this point eventually, and things are definitely starting to get awkward. Ace Trainer Brenda sends out her final Pokemon, and we have to keep Gengar in here to take it out if we're going to have any shot at getting out of this deathless. The Shadow Ball takes out Kirlia, and thankfully no crit from Aerial Ace. I completely forgot about this Lopunny though, and now I'm not so sure what to do here. We have to take Gengar out obviously, but for who? Who is going to be tanky enough to potentially take 2 hits from Lopunny and Staraptor? I settled on Tentacruel, and upon switching in, Lopunny just goes for an agility, and Staraptor hits us for a large chunk with Aerial Ace. A crit would certainly take us out here, so I'm going to give Crobat a crack at it now. What do we get hit with here? Another agility from Lopunny, and a massive takedown from Staraptor. I go for the Roost here in hopes that at least one Pokemon will suffer from paralysis. But so far, nothing's giving in. And honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Lopunny became fast enough to outspeed some of my other Pokemon, even with paralysis. Staraptor's takedowns have actually helped us get into just enough range for Crobat to kill with Cross Poison, and that's exactly what we go for. Staraptor finally goes down, and Lopunny finally loses a turn. Hippopotas comes in now, and on the following turn, I finally take this Lopunny out with another Cross Poison. The ground hippo hits us with a takedown, bringing our health down to critical levels, and we could have easily lost Crobat there to a crit. Worried that that takedown would deal too much damage to our physically frail Roselia, I switched into Skunk Tank instead to try to bring this one home. The Night Slash comes out, And not only did I forget about Hippopotas's big physical body on the defensive side, I also didn't account for its move pool. Turns out, Hippopotas learns Earthquake at level 37, which is not something I thought it would have had until at least level 40, but I guess it makes sense for a first stage Pokemon all the way up at this level. I'm so sorry, buddy. You just can't catch a break in this challenge. I send out Tentacruel to put an end to this fight, and to Iron Island as well. Without Skuntank and Drapion, we no longer have a Dark type with us, and that is going to leave us in an incredibly vulnerable position against any Psychic threats we encounter. Don't ask me what I'm going to do about Lucian. I don't even want to think about it right now. After the fight, we deal with Team Galactic and then part ways with Riley. At least he doesn't force random eggs into our bag like someone else I know. Our ultimate reward for completing Iron Island is the Shiny Stone, so we can now take care of the final evolution for this attempt. Roselia has done well for us. I'm glad he's still with us and can now show us what he's truly capable of. Back in Canalave City now to bury the fallen. We salute you, Skuntank. I'm taking Bibarel out for now as we'll need an HM slave in a little bit anyway, but for all the Dustox lovers out there, myself included, our bug friend is going to see considerably more action now for the rest of the run. So, if you are wondering what late game Dustox looks like, well, we just might find out soon enough. And with that, this episode is now over. Another one lost, and now we're down to our last 6. I'm going to keep this attempt going for as long as I can, but if we do lose anyone else from this point forward, it would probably be best to just try again in a fresh attempt. How far do you guys think we can go? I'm curious to find out myself. In the meantime, as usual, please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe for more content like this. That's it from me. I'll see you next time.